Welcome to Inside Basketball Live. Are the Toronto Raptors open to trading RJ Barrett and Immanual Quickley? Not so fast. Hang on one second. They're 24, they're 25. We need to be patient. We haven't seen this core together. La, 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 la. But the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. And I think that it would be very, very important to understand that the Toronto Raptors have not just employed a new front office, this front office has been there for over 10 years now. So we have a consistent body of work that we can go back and evaluate the types of players that they have consistently valued, the types of players they've consistently paid, the types of players they've consistently traded for. And Noble Venom saying, where did you get this report from? So I am hearing that the Toronto Raptors are open to moving specifically one of these players. The report of De'Aaron Fox being out there on the trade market, that the Raptors are pursuing it, that comes from ESPN Needs IKD. No one's pushing back too hard. What his sources are, I don't know. If he wants to let me know what the sources are, but we'll respond to it. So I'll tell you right now, I have never completely bought into the idea that this core as it's structured makes sense. And I'll prove that to you in this video, that this core as structured does not make sense. And I'll show you the types of players that this team has consistently valued over the last few years. And let's take a look at some of those players. This is one of those players. This is one of those players that the Raptors really valued. And this is what his analytics profile looks like. See, in the end, it doesn't really matter if you think the guy can hoop. It matters if he can hoop. It matters if the box score says he can hoop. It matters if the analytics agree with that eye test. And Fred VanVleet, frankly, for all the shit I talked about him, we've never debated whether or not Fred VanVleet was a good basketball player. Fred VanVleet's an awesome basketball player. And this and the winning that has resulted in Houston by him being there is proof, is evidence that he is a good basketball player. The fact that he got paid $43 million, a bit of an overpay if you ask me, but he's a valuable commodity in the NBA because he results positively on the box score. He can run the pick and roll. He's not error prone. He doesn't make too many mistakes defensively. And overall, him being on the court doesn't usually hurt you. Now, obviously, you can point to the 1 for 11 shooting. You can point to the cold shooting stretch, and you can be like, sometimes the tunnel vision, you can be like, this guy's not a very good basketball player. Bones Highland's a better basketball player than Fred VanVleet. That's what the casual fan would say. But I guarantee you, Bones Highland is never going to get $20 million, $30 million, or $40 million from an NBA front office because front offices care about winning. Another player that the Toronto Raptors really valued, this guy. This is the guy that they traded Fred VanVleet, that they moved off of Fred, Pascal, OG. They shifted the whole timeline to this guy. Take a look at all those green bars. Those green bars are really telling you that he's a pretty well-rounded player. I don't even think this is scratching the surface of who he is as a basketball player. I think those numbers are going to be 97th percentile on one side and 92nd percentile on the other side, if not higher. So this is very, very promising for a 23-year-old who's been battling injuries. But Rymaster, we don't need your energy. You can just leave. Pseudo-intellectual. Peace out, man. Fuck out of here. All right. So moving on. OG Anunoby. That's another player that the entire league valued. And look at his analytics. Again, if you watch OG Anunoby dribble a basketball, you might be convinced that OG Anunoby isn't an NBA player. But if you can see the impact that he's had on the Knicks defense last year, if you can see their win percentage with him and without him, you'll understand that the analytics are not lying to you, that OG Anunoby is one of the most valuable commodities in the NBA. And there's a reason why the Toronto Raptors got as much as they did for him. Okay? Take a look at another player that the Toronto Raptors really valued enough that they overlooked perhaps his defensive regression, which is very real, but he's a talented player. Now, was he a supermax player? No. Was he worth 35 to 40 million though? I think in the right situation, you can sell yourself on Pascal Siakam being worth 35 to 40 million. Whether he'll keep that progression up is another story. Now, so far, we've just seen 4 very good players, all of whom are being paid around $40 million a year or north of $45 million in the case of Pascal Siakam. Now, let's take a look at some players who aren't nearly that good. And we'll start with RJ Barrett, right? Now, people will point to the 23 points, 6 assists, 6 rebounds, but they're not really considering pace. They're not really considering system. They're not really break bread saying, damn, this reminds me of how many good players the Raptors groomed. Yeah. But this is the reality of the situation. Now, I'll argue that everything on the defensive side for the Raptors right now looks worse than it needs to be. I think they could be much better. And all of these analytics are, unfortunately, a function of fit and role. Okay. If you want to put Jakob Poeltl out there as the switch defender on point guards, he's going to look terrible. So right now, RJ Barrett looks a lot worse than he needs to be defensively, but the offensive elements are real, right? There's limitations when it comes to the turnovers. There's limitations when it comes to the finishing, the shooting. There's all sorts of limitations. There's limitations when it comes to size, processing. And the truth is, there's not just a little gap between an RJ Barrett and a De'Aaron Fox. There's a huge gap. Offensively, there's not a little gap between an RJ Barrett and a Pascal Siakam. There's a huge gap. And that's what I don't think a lot of fans want to realize, because they see 23 points on one side, 23 points on the other side, and they think that it's supposed to be equal. I'll tell you right now, if you have Pascal Siakam in place of RJ Barrett, you're paying twice the amount of money for a player who's 6 years older, and you might have 2 more wins. But those 2 wins don't really matter right now because you're a bad team. They'll matter later, though. They matter in a game. They matter in a game 7 that a guy can't be hunted. I'll tell you right now, look at the teams that are contending for a championship right now and point to one starter on any of those teams that is as easy to hunt defensively as this dude. There is not one. Orlando, do you consider Orlando no, I don't think we consider Orlando a contender. But if you look at the Celtics, there's not a one. There's not one player that plays a minute for the Celtics that is as awful defensively as RJ Barrett. And frankly, it's not just RJ Barrett. There's a lot of players we're going to look at on this list that just, you know what? Some people are going to dismiss everything I'm going to say right now. They're going to say it's hating. I've stood there and I've defended RJ Barrett relentlessly on the panel. I've defended his shot selection. I've called him one of the most improved players. I think his creation and load jump here is huge. I think he's been vastly better for Toronto. I just don't think people realize that when you're saying he's better in Toronto, I don't think you realize how god-awful he was in New York. I don't think you understand intellectually. I don't think you understand what it takes for a team to salary dump a 3rd overall pick. I don't think you understand that. Who was once considered one of the best high school players in the world. I don't think you completely understand just how bad it was and how much better it is today. But don't confuse better with great. Don't say progression means you're great. Now, look, I can become a better cook. I can take some lessons. I can become a better cook. I'm not Emeril Lagasse. I'm not Gordon Ramsay. So there's going to be gaps and levels here. And the gaps and levels here are physical to some extent, right? There's size limitations. There's lateral quickness limitations. There's processing limitations. And I think RJ is getting better. I do. And which is why I'm not necessarily a proponent for trade him. Okay. Okay. Moving on. This is one of your best players, because I'm going to show you this is one of your worst players. And actually, he's not even your worst player. That's the craziest part. So this is Davion Mitchell, right? Have you seen the Raptors under Masai Ujiri have a core piece throughout the entire We the North era, whether you're talking Gravis Vasquez, whether you're talking Patrick Patterson, whether you're talking Terrence Ross, whether you're talking Pascal, OG, Fred, Danny, DeMar, there is not one player, Norm, even if you want to extend We the North to include that team that went to the playoffs, Chris Boucher, Kem Birch, there ain't one player, not a one player who's this bad. So when you start penciling him into the future, please understand this Raptors team, this Raptors front office, they didn't just lose their mind overnight. Now, here's a rookie that is showing some promise, in my opinion, and is largely being elevated by his elite efficiency and his incredible 3-point rate. I think this guy has a chance to stick around. Now, he may not be great defensively per the analytics, but I think he has flash potential to be a middle of the pack defender. I've seen good moments. I've seen bad moments. Okay. So I think that he has a chance. I think Ochai has a chance. We're not going to look at Ochai's analytics here, but Ochai has a chance. Okay. Take a look at another player. This is going to be ugly. Oh boy. But look at the defense, man. This is basically what Herb Jones looked like as a rookie. Right around. This is around what Herb Jones was as a rookie. And we'll see Herb Jones now. So you can at least project that Jonathan Mobo is at least going to be able to satisfy a role. How big a role will come down to the offense. I'm not penciling him as a future starter or a future key rotation player. But this is, at worst, you have found the Chris Boucher replacement with greater basketball IQ. You have found Precious Achiuwa's replacement with greater consistency. Now, what he can do with the jump shot, his offensive game, this will be summers and summers and summers of work. But maybe one day, if I'm looking at the max upside of a Jonathan Mobo, I'm seeing a 92nd to 94th percentile defender on the very upside. That's one of the best defenders in the league. And I'm seeing a 60th to 70th percentile offensive player who will often struggle with certain situations, but will make up for it with his elite processing, his great burst and athleticism, his offensive rebound rate, which is already in the 97th percentile as a rookie. He has a role. Now, again, it's going to come down to Jonathan Mobo. If he wants to be a 15-minute per game guy, a 2-minute per game guy, or a 30-minute per game guy, comes down to him. He wants to be Bam Adebayo. He wants to be Naz Reid. Now we can talk. If he wants to be Precious Achiuwa plus basketball IQ, that's still a 10th or 11th guy in your rotation. So I think you found something here. Now, this is going to look ugly to some people, the next one, but I assure you it's not as bad. Now, this is a player that I believe in. The analytics look horrible. He also has a -6 box plus minus on the season. Jamal Shed also shares that with him. There's certain, let's say, I'm going to say there's certain liberties that you're going to take with rookies that you're not going to, if it looks like this next year, he'll be on the block. But I don't think it's going to look like this next year. And sometimes when you think about rookies, you have to project a lot of realistic upside into it. You got to look at this and say, what can this become? What are the physical gaps and limitations right now with a Jacoby Walter? What is the projected upside of a guy who defends this well, who slithers around the court, who has this kind of lateral quickness? What could an additional 20 pounds and one more offseason with Darko Rajakovic do? Okay, so let's see. 6th percentile offensive right now. So he's basically a 0-level scorer, according to. But I think he has projections of being a 3-level scorer. He's just terrible on all 3 levels right now. He's not efficient enough at the paint. He's not efficient enough from 3. He's taking a sufficient amount of threes, not enough for my liking, but he's not making them. And this is going to hurt. But look at that 52nd percentile offensive rebound rate. That's a very encouraging sign for a 6'4" guard with a 6'10" wingspan. The physical profile itself is encouraging. His basketball IQ overall, I think, is a little bit underrated. He processes the game really well, and he slithers through gaps. So, again, you might just have a player who can replicate a lot of what RJ Barrett does for you in a few years with Jacoby Walter. So I am very, very bullish on his future. I don't see him as, oh, this is the future starter 100%, but I see the room to grow into that. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. The comment is blocking the stat name. I'm so sorry. Let me go back. Thank you, Denzer, for that. Sorry. Sometimes I accidentally leave comments up. Okay, so here's Grady Dick. Again, this doesn't look great right now. 6th percentile defense. And this is the biggest problem. This is the biggest problem. Grady has not been good defensively. He is weak. He's being put out to, according to Crafted, his defensive role is hidden. He is not necessarily being asked to guard the best players. I think he's had competitive moments. I think he's had competent moments, but nothing about his defense so far projects good defender. Could he be an average defender? That's a stretch. But it is really this Grady component of how high the Raptors possibly are to take him 13th overall. Granted, it wasn't like there were superstars left on the board. They didn't pick him over Case and Wallace. They didn't pick him over Bilal Coulibaly. They didn't pick him over Amen Thompson, Asar Thompson. They didn't pick him over Brandon Miller. They picked him as the best player available. That's what you can do. When you have the 13th overall pick, you chose not to tank. You didn't go for the Victor Wembanyama thing. Okay, cool. So this is what you picked. And so far, the pick looks brilliant. The pick looks brilliant. He is absolutely outshining not only most of the players, if not all the players picked after him. He's also been quite a bit better than guys like Taylor Hendricks to some extent, although I think the Raptors might have preferred Taylor Hendricks or Jarris Walker. and he's definitely been a lot better than Jet Howard. So the Magic absolutely screwed up. However, there's gaps to go between him, Derek Lively, Cason Wallace as it comes to impacting winning right now. Because again, what Grady can give you offensively, he takes away defensively. It's a very similar situation with the RJ Barrett thing. If RJ Barrett was a 70th percentile defender, we have no conversation. 24-year-old, good defender, growing offensive player with some gaps, we can build with that. But when you are this bad defensively, there can only be one of you on the court at once. If I ever want to be good, number one, this guy cannot be my second best defender ever. And the problem is right now he is, because he's just a hair better than RJ at times. Sometimes it's really oscillating between these two. They're both horrible defensively. They're so horrible defensively that they're making Jakob Poeltl worse defensively. Like, that's how bad they are, because there's blow-bys, it's lack of reach, it's lack of speed, it's lack of activity on the ball, off the ball. If Grady gets switched on to a big like a Bam Adebayo or Jaren Jackson, you basically have to surrender 2 points, a foul, or you have to send a double, triple sometimes, because he doesn't contain the basketball very well. So James Walsh saying, I just tuned in, so I don't know what was discussed so far. IQ has no trade value because of his contract. I very, very much disagree, because you're going to see how much better IQ is than the players we've been talking about so far. Okay, so moving on from Grady, let's talk about Immanual Quickley. You know, this is Immanual Quickley. Now, Immanual Quickley was what came back in the OG Anunoby trade. Sam Vecini, who I at times respect, at times don't respect, said this trade was about Immanual Quickley more than it was about OG Anunoby, more than it was about RJ Barrett. He said the best player in this deal could be Immanual Quickley. That's how some people feel about Immanual Quickley. And I'll tell you right now, while there is a gap between Immanual Quickley and De'Aaron Fox, and it is a pretty big one when it comes to creation, when it comes to athleticism, when it comes to clutch performance, there's also a gap when it comes to Immanual Quickley and Immanual Quickley and De'Aaron Fox when it comes to shooters. IQ takes just as many threes as De'Aaron Fox, but he makes more of them. He takes just as many threes, but he takes deeper threes. He has a handle. He has a wiggle. He's not a worse defender than De'Aaron Fox. He's certainly not a better defender than De'Aaron Fox, but they're equivalent on that end. So really, the gap between Immanual Quickley and De'Aaron Fox is volume, age. De'Aaron Fox is 3 years older than Immanual Quickley as well. So do you think that yes, it is an actual report, but I wanted to discuss the merits of being open to moving and why you might be open. So there's this assumption that just because you have a player on your team and the front office talks nice about them, that they are not going anywhere, that they're here forever. BBQ, et cetera, et cetera. So I want to really, this is huge. Yeah. De'Aaron Fox is a way better rim pressure athlete. He is a better athlete. He is a quicker athlete. He is more dynamic off the dribble. He attracts more of a response from the defense. Absolutely. Luke said, imagine we traded IQ plus more for Fox and IQ turns out to be just as good as Fox. Definitely a possibility. I don't necessarily think it's a possibility, although I think he can close the gap a little bit. I do think he can close the gap a little bit. I do think that there is a massive talent gap overall, but I think in the right situation, Immanuel Quickley can be 80% of De'Aaron Fox. And I'm not sure 80% of De'Aaron Fox plus 2 first-round picks, 3 first-round picks is worth the actual De'Aaron Fox, especially when the 80%, bargain basement De'Aaron Fox, because neither are great passers, right? So if you want to really talk about that, neither are great visionary passers. You're not talking about trading for, prime Trae Young or something like that. Neither player has this incredible, defensive profile. They're both average to above average defenders at their positions. So it's not like you're trading for prime Kyle Lowry in either one of these guys. I refuse to believe this hype that De'Aaron Fox is like one of the 5 best point guards in the league, but he's definitely closer to a top 10 point guard than Immanuel Quickley right now. That much I'll tell you. Let me show you some other players that really do work out in terms of what the Raptors like. And just to give you context of the players you're playing on your 7-21 squad and those players and these other players who maybe you don't think too much about. Here's Trey Murphy III, a player that the Pelicans are reportedly not open to moving. This is what his analytics profile looks like. This is Herb Jones, a player who's having a bit of a down year. This is what his analytics profile looks like. Looks a lot like OG Anunoby, okay? But just way cheaper and way less hyped. Okay, here's Cameron Johnson, the player that I wanted to trade for this offseason. Would have traded Bruce Brown plus a first-round pick, the Indiana pick, whatever, to get him because I thought that the Raptors had a chance and Cameron Johnson would have swung it. This is what his analytics profile looks like. And here's one more player just for fun, which is Donovan Mitchell. This is what a real superstar looks like. This is the closest thing that was available to the Raptors at any point in the last few years in terms of superstars, because let's be honest, Giannis, Jokic, Embiid, these guys were not available. This was the closest thing. I'm going to call this, there's tier 1 superstars, there's tier 2 superstars, there's all NBA guys, there's all-stars, sub-all-stars. Right now, to be completely honest, Scottie is an all-star, and he is the only all-star on your team. 5-ish box plus minus is all-star, high-level all-star, mid to high-level all-star type of stuff. His analytics profile doesn't look great this year, but I think it could be much better with better spacing and with more skill work. I think Scottie's going to be just great. I think Scottie has a chance to be just as good as Donovan Mitchell, if not better. So that's my upside on him. Now, the question, if you're the Toronto Raptors, is what do you want to put around that? When do you want to do it? How do you want to do it? And what are you willing to give up to do it? Which comes to De'Aaron Fox. De'Aaron Fox is not Donovan Mitchell. He is not a tier 1 superstar, nor is he a tier 2 superstar. He is basically what Scottie is right now. He's an all-star. So you'd be putting 2 all-stars together and hoping that it works a little bit better than Domantas Sabonis and De'Aaron Fox over in Sacramento. I think this is possibly, if you're factoring in a lot of growth, if you're factoring in hitting on a top 10 pick this year, this might be something that works out. There's contract situation, though. There is a contract situation with De'Aaron Fox, which I think could, make it a little less appetizing for the Toronto Raptors. Maybe they don't necessarily know if De'Aaron Fox would want to be here long term. I reject any notion that anyone who's like, oh, well, if he doesn't want to be in Sacramento, he won't want to be in Toronto. That's crazy to me. But what would the deal look like? Would you be able to get Keegan Murray back? If you did give up a couple of first-round picks, how protected are those picks? Would it be RJ plus De'Aaron Fox? RJ for Keegan Murray and Quickley for De'Aaron Fox. Is that too much? Would you get Keon Ellis back in this deal? And if you did, would you be looking to compete right away, or would you be shutting it down? How does De'Aaron Fox react to that? De'Aaron Fox actually shares a lot in common with Scottie, which is I think that they both tend to be a little bit too passive at times. It's crazy when you see De'Aaron Fox really dialed in, how clutch he can be. He was the clutch player of the year last year. And, he's clutch for a reason. He cannot be stopped. Going downhill, he's unstoppable. He is a very unstoppable player. Now, I personally am not for trading for De'Aaron Fox. Number one, he is 27 years old. That matters to me. His contract situation matters to me. The fact that he is a quick twitch guard who sometimes has shaky decision-making, even if you believe that Darko Rajakovic could unlock it and turn him into John Morant, I don't necessarily know if that's something I'm willing to bet on. He will be super expensive. But the question then is RJ Barrett a part of the future? And if RJ Barrett is a part of the future, who are you factoring out? Because RJ Barrett does not look very much like any player the Toronto Raptors have decided to have as a starter in any iteration when they were trying to compete for a championship. He doesn't look like Danny Green. He doesn't look like Kawhi Leonard. He doesn't look like Terrence Ross. There's no player that matches his profile even 30%. The only player that's even close is DeMar DeRozan, where there was a net negative defensively, but there was enough offense around him to sustain. The issue with this is that you could have never played DeMar DeRozan with a Grady Dick. You can't. You could never play those two guys together because they would be hunted relentlessly. Neither could cover for the other. If the opponent just wanted to score, all they would have to do is force a switch where one of those two was on the same side of the court and they would have open buckets. There is a level to the defense that must be sustained when you are thinking of trying to build a championship. As good as I think Scottie Barnes is, he's not Victor Wembanyama. He is not single-handedly floor raising your defense to Rudy Gobert levels. He's not Dikembe Mutombo. He's not Ben Wallace. He is, however, a really good defender. He is a really good defender, and he has taken a leap this year to the point where a few games ago, before he came back, the Toronto Raptors were a 25th ranked defense without him and a 16th ranked defense with him. That's up 9 spots. That matters. That matters. Now, a lot of your games with him have been at home. I think maybe that matters too. But Ghost has IQ. Why are comments that are simple questions being deleted? Censorship now? I will encourage every moderator to please not censor anything. I'm not deleting anything at all. There was one person that I blocked who I believe said something about something being casual or whatever, and I was just done with him. But if you want to write something, please write it. I don't really care. So look, this is a difficult conversation every single time, right? When I said that it was time to move off of Pascal and Fred, I think a lot of people had issues with it at the time. But I just was looking at the future and I was like, look, if this is your future, you don't have a future. So you have to hit reset. And the good thing about guys like Pascal, OG, Fred is if you move them at the right time, they have a lot of value because they're valuable pieces. Just because it's valuable to somebody else on their timeline doesn't mean it's valuable on your timeline. Jimmy Butler is a very valuable piece right now for somebody. He's not valuable for the Raptors, though, because you're not contending. And by the time you're ready to contend, he will be done. Okay? So right now, if you could choose between Bam Adebayo and Jimmy Butler, well, if you're the Lakers, you probably want Jimmy Butler. If you're the Warriors, you probably want Jimmy Butler. If you're most teams, though, you probably want Bam Adebayo. And that's where I think the timeline stuff comes in. That's where I think the portability and fit stuff comes in. And the Raptors would be very, very wise, I think, to continue doing what they're doing right now. Now, do y'all remember that picture of Masai Ujiri and Sean Marks at the Rutgers game? I think that the Toronto Raptors have a very, very good relationship with the Nets. And I think that Masai Ujiri has a good relationship with Sean Marks, which goes back almost 20 years now. And I think these two men actually have a very similar philosophy when it comes to asset management, asset valuation. I think they like and value some of the same types of players. When it came time to moving Kevin Durant, who did the Nets go for? They went for Cameron Johnson and Mikal Bridges. You know what Mikal Bridges and Cameron Johnson have in common? They're Masai Ujiri type players. They're absolutely Masai Ujiri type players. And what did the Nets do with Cameron Johnson and Mikal Bridges? What did they do with Dennis Schroeder? They exhibited them. Mikal Bridges was considered a part of a deal for Kevin Durant. Just 2 years later, he went for 6 first-round picks, 5 picks, and a swap. So could the Raptors be doing something similar with Immanuel Quickley and RJ Barrett, where you have this free-flowing offense, the Darko ball system? Everyone's offensive stats get kind of overrated, right? In this system, everyone's offense is going to look a little bit better. Granted, you're also trying to lose. So everything is going to look worse than it really is. But I'm saying in terms of like the raw box score, 23 points, 6 rebounds, 7 assists, whatever. Yeah, more possessions, more opportunities, more spacing, more movement, more cuts, more assists overall. Every time Darko says, I want 30 assists, I want 30 assists, you know what you're not realizing? Someone's getting those 30 assists. Whether it's Scottie getting those 10 of them, whether it's RJ getting 8 of them, whether it's Immanuel Quickley getting 6 of them, that's impacting their perceived playmaking, passing value across the league, right? So when you consider that element of it, are the Raptors not basically doing that? They're creating a perfect system in which players are designed to look a little bit better and a little bit more talented than they really are. And, you have like a guy like Jakob Poeltl and guys like Scottie Barnes who are doing so much of the heavy lifting of the offense in terms of screen setting and playmaking. You have a guy like Kelly Olynyk can make you look good, man. Kelly Olynyk's a great passer. He can make you look good. Bruce Brown, in theory, if you ever played basketball for the Raptors, can make you look good. He can make you look better. So all of what I'm saying is at some point you'll be able to, I think, rehabilitate the value of RJ Barrett and Immanuel Quickley to the point where they will be worth exponentially more, if not slightly more, than what you got from New York. Because again, Immanuel Quickley's value in New York was he's a backup guard. RJ Barrett's value in New York was he's a defensive albatross and he can't shoot threes and he has trouble with playmaking. Well, Immanuel Quickley's not a backup guard anymore. RJ Barrett does not have difficulties with playmaking. His shooting percentages have been solid. How difficult would it be for a Sacramento Kings or a Golden State Warriors or a New Orleans Pelicans or a Brooklyn Nets or, frankly, the Atlanta Hawks to sell themselves on the idea of RJ being this for them, right? So I think that that's what you have to think about with this. Would I be open to moving Immanuel Quickley and RJ Barrett long term? RJ, yes. IQ, maybe. The rest, Jakob, yes. These are the pieces that I think you need to elevate their value, develop them, and see if you can move them. There's this notion that this development staff is here to build the Raptors core. Actually, no. It's to elevate the Raptors asset base. When Darko Rajakovic says, I want Jakob Poeltl to facilitate more like a Domantas Sabonis, what's he really saying? Well, partially what he's saying is I want to create a value in this, contract that we have that other teams would be willing to potentially part with multiple firsts because they would see him the way the OKC Thunder saw Isaiah Hartenstein. And the only way to do that is to actually develop the player and then to put them in positions where they're able to exhibit their talents. You're able to put Jakob Poeltl in playmaking positions that maybe the San Antonio Spurs didn't necessarily put him into because that wasn't their organizational goal. There was a stretch this year where Jakob Poeltl scored 90 points, and he was the first player to do it as efficiently as he did since Shaquille O'Neal in 1995. Other teams are noticing. The asset is rising. But what you have to realize is there's an internal calculus in terms of how the Raptors view basketball players, right? Hope Rob skipped that part. The rest was great insight. Sorry, I'm trying to keep up with the chat, and the chat is tripping me out right now. Samson said something about people comments poisoning the well regarding Davion. Do I need to flash the analytics again? I don't need to say anything about Davion. His numbers are speaking for themselves. These are the numbers. My comments are not forcing him to be 26th percentile in terms of true shooting and 36th percentile in terms of shot quality and 29th percentile in terms of free throw rate and 28th percentile among guards in terms of offensive rebound rate. My words are not doing this. Okay? It's his play. I take major issue when analysis is turned into this is slander because it doesn't agree with my viewpoint. I don't care. Eric Shoot saying Ibaka was so good for us after the Magic trade. Yeah, playing with good players will help you do that. Jason Williams saying whole starting lineup needs to be two-way. Here's the thing. I don't necessarily even agree that every single player in your starting lineup has to be a great defender. I don't think that I think that's sometimes an unrealistic bar. I don't think everyone has to be OG Anunoby for you to be a lockdown defense, but everyone needs to be able to facilitate and participate in a role. Okay. So If Jakob Poeltl is your worst defender, you can be fine. If Jakob Poeltl is your best defender, you're cooked. Scottie Barnes can be your second best defender, and you could have a top 5 defense. I have no doubt. But if he's your best defender by a country mile, you're going to be middle of the pack. Okay. So this is the element that I'm trying to point to, which is past behavior predicts future behavior. And the Toronto Raptors have never shown me a willingness to go long term on a player like RJ Barrett. Now, the emotional side is he's 24 years old. He's improving. He's very, very fun. His development has been awesome. He's a hometown kid. He's humble as hell. I really like him. I really do. Y'all may not believe that, and I really don't care. That's your problem. I do like RJ Barrett. I like RJ Barrett enough to defend his shot quality and random, you've never heard me come out and say he's so unclutch, even though he's missed free throws and shots and so many shots. I'm not slandering the guy. I will never slander the guy. I genuinely like him. I mean, I wish we had a team full of OGs and, Herb Jones, where, if RJ is your only weak link on defense, you can be fine. You can be a top 7 defense. It might hurt you a couple times in the playoffs, but, him as a transition athlete, you're trying to put him in situations like last year. I looked at it, and Darko Ball was basically, I think, 3rd or 2nd in terms of offense generated efficiency of looks. So Darko Rajakovic is incredibly good at designing an offense which is free-flowing, where numbers are going to rise, assists are going to rise, right? And you try to put players in situations like that, like with Davion Mitchell. Davion Mitchell's passer rating is incredible right now. His point of attack defense is awesome. So if he wasn't shooting dog shit, like if he wasn't shooting as poorly as he is, and he's turning it around recently, you might actually have an actual asset on your hands. The question is, do you internally believe that? Or do you externally present that, right? Externally, you present the analysis that Jakob Poeltl is your center. He's great. He's here to stay. Internally, you may realize that there's some complications long-term building a core with Scottie and Jakob. You internally understand that RJ plus Grady is a very awkward fit. And the second you get a top 5 pick or a top 6 pick in this draft, which you're clearly aiming for, and it's a wing, one of these guys is going, and it ain't Grady. That's your internal calculus. Your external calculus is push RJ for all-star, let him handle load. He's our point guard. He's growing. He's developing. There's a front-facing element to basketball that you just have to say the right stuff. And then there's a back-facing, like what you internally believe to be true. I believe that the Toronto Raptors started building around Scottie Barnes the second he was drafted. I believe they allowed themselves to be shit tested on it for about a year. But after his rookie season, it was completely clear that this team was being built around Scottie Barnes. However, the media told us that it wasn't, that it was about Fred and Pascal. Well, you saw what they gave Pascal up for, right? Now, please understand, Pascal wanted to stay. Why'd they give him up? They were building around him. He was the best player to some people in franchise history, or better, one of the top 3 players in franchise history. He fit the timeline. Why did they trade him? Because the external is different than the internal. The internal calculus is your scouting. The internal is your evaluation. The internal is your privately held opinions about certain players and how you want to play as a basketball team. Your internal is the types of players that you believe philosophically work with Scottie Barnes. I have no doubt that Grady Dick is almost untouchable for the Raptors. Because he is almost untouchable for the Raptors, it makes RJ's fit on this team very clunky. I don't know if the Raptors, now here's a question I have. I don't know if the Raptors see Scottie Barnes as a point guard. I know he sees himself as a point guard. I see him as a point guard. I don't know if the Raptors see him as a point guard. But what I do know is he can't guard point guards full-time in the NBA. So whoever is going to share the backcourt with him is going to have to do that job, which means long-term, I do see a place for Immanuel Quickley on this team if he can improve defensively, right? When you take a look at the gap between the types of second stars other teams are building around and the types of second stars you're building around, let me show you the gap because it is quite frankly enormous. Hang on one second. Where is this? Okay. This is the gap. Take a look at this. This is the gap. Jalen Williams, RJ Barrett. This is the gap. Now, the numbers 21, 6.8, sorry, 23.5, RJ clears. 6.8, RJ clears. 6.1, RJ clears, right? Nobody in the world who has two functional brain cells could ever say that RJ Barrett is better than Jalen Williams or that it's close, because it's not. There's huge gaps between these two players. Defensively, offensively, in terms of efficiency, they are very far apart. Jalen Williams is the third best player on the OKC Thunder. Some of you people think RJ Barrett is the best player on the Raptors. This is the gap. Now, I'm probably not going to convince you. If you walked into this video thinking RJ Barrett's an all-star, Immanuel Quickley will become De'Aaron Fox, Ja Morant, nothing I'm going to say is going to convince you. But at some point, you are going to make a decision, because $32.5 million for Immanuel Quickley, $27 million for RJ Barrett. That is more than a max contract for a player, two players that combined total do not impact winning as much as one real max player, like a Jalen Williams, like a Chad Holmgren. Those two players, if you offered the Thunder right now, Immanuel Quickley plus RJ Barrett for Jalen Williams, they would slam the phone in your face. So fast. So fast. So this is the gap. So if you want championships, you need to find another player almost as good as Scottie Barnes, if not better than Scottie Barnes. I don't know. You know, if you want to go, you want to go find Nikola Jokic. Okay, cool. You know, you got to find another player on that level. That's your core. Then you got to pray that Grady becomes a better defender and a much better offensive player. Then you got to hope that some of these young assets that you have will be able to rise to the top. Then you got to wait on time and development. And then you got to take your playoff runs and reps. In the end, at some point, you have to factor in that at some point you have to pick your team. You can shuffle it around a little bit. You can move it around. You can shuffle the deck. You know, Terrence Ross for Serge Ibaka, shuffle the deck. Jonas Valanciunas moves out for Marc Gasol, shuffle the deck. But continuity is very, very important when you're talking about winning championships. And it doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense to go all in on Immanuel Quickley plus RJ Barrett plus Scottie Barnes plus Grady Dick, try to get this core, whatever you want to call it, 2 years of playoff reps together, and then try to move it. Because the minute you move it, you disrupt the continuity, and then you have to almost start over with a new core. So it's a fine balance between maintaining the asset, developing the asset, shipping the asset, waiting for the time when the market opens up. There are suitors for Immanuel Quickley right now. I'll guarantee it. There's a lot of teams that are high on him. I'll tell you a couple right now: San Antonio, Orlando. From my internal, from what I've heard, those two teams are high on him. They value him. Pairing an Immanuel Quickley with a Franz Wagner and a Paolo Banchero, I think that's something that would appeal to the Magic enough that they might look off someone like a Jalen Suggs. Do you value Jalen Suggs next to Scottie Barnes more than you value Immanuel Quickley? I think that's a debate to be had. So when I think about Immanuel Quickley being moved, that's the type of move that I think might make sense, where you get a defensive upgrade, they get the shooting upgrade, and it's kind of like tomato, you know, for that. With RJ Barrett, I think people are going to be shocked when they find out what he's actually worth around the league. So this is not me saying like, oh my God, RJ's trash. RJ's not trash. RJ's a very, very good. He is a rotation level player in the NBA who is currently being featured like a star. He's being given touches like a star. He's top 20 in the NBA in usage, right? I did an entire post on X the other day breaking down who he is. He's better. He's significantly better than his critics want to believe. Significantly better, because I don't think enough people give credit to his transition play, to his relentless ability to attack, and to his ability to sort of pass out of those attacks. So I think he's better than his harshest critics believe he is. He is, however, significantly worse at this moment than his biggest fans believe. And I think threading the needle on that, finding a way to help him become more efficient, finding a way to help him maybe become a little bit more respectable on defense, it will only go so far. Because at some point you're going to realize you're going to go into the playoffs and you're going to see a lineup with RJ Barrett plus Grady Dick, and you're going to realize that these two players are fundamentally unplayable together. It's not about Scottie and RJ. That pairing works. Scottie works with Grady. Scottie works with Jacoby. Scottie works with RJ. Scottie works with IQ. That's a great thing. Great players work with a lot more players. But when you start talking about RJ plus Grady at the wing, where the league is so talented, imagine a series against the Orlando Magic. I want you to just think about this, and this is the last thing I'm going to say. When you talk about, potentially moving forward with this core, the first question I want you to ask is, do you think Grady Dick or RJ Barrett are sixth men on this team? Or do you want both to start? If you want both to start, I need you to answer this question. Who are each of them guarding in a first round series against Boston? Who are each of them guarding in a series against Orlando? Who are each of them guarding in a series against Cleveland? Those three teams. I want you to tell me which of those guys is checking Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown, because whoever is getting, literally, they're both getting cooked. So you're going to have to hide them. You're going to have to hide Grady on Derek White and RJ on Drew Holiday, which means now your best player, Scottie Barnes, has to take on Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown, which means your other player, Immanuel Quickley, in this lineup is going to have to take on Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum. This doesn't work. It doesn't work. It cannot work. Consider this against any good team, literally any good team. Cleveland. Who's guarding Darius Garland here? Nobody. Who's guarding Donovan Mitchell? Nobody. Who's guarding Evan Mobley? That's tough. I mean, if Evan Mobley continues to get better, he's basically a 95th percentile player right now. If he continues to get better, you don't have an answer for any of these guys. Scottie can't guard 5 players. So this is where you say, okay, I understand that Trey Murphy III is not more talented offensively, in theory, than RJ Barrett. I understand he can't do 23, 6, and 6. I know that. I know he's not going to do 23, 6, and 6. But maybe what I need from that spot is above league average replacement defense, because Trey Murphy can guard Jason Tatum competitively. He can guard a Jaylen Brown. He can switch onto a big. It's not just, one-on-one, RJ Barrett can't guard Jaylen Brown. Nobody can guard anybody one-on-one in the NBA when we're talking about stars. Who can he switch onto? What happens when a Kristaps Porzingis what happens when they switch and Kristaps Porzingis ends up on RJ Barrett? What happens to your defense? 3 to the ball, collapse, 2 points, foul, every time. So again, I refuse to believe that a team that drafted OG Anunoby, Pascal Siakam, Scottie Barnes has just completely abandoned defense. I refuse to believe that a team that so highly values two-way players and high basketball IQ is just going to abandon all of that and say, no. You know what we're going to do? We're going to play Scottie out of position at 4 so we can play RJ and Grady and IQ together. This core does not work. Who you trade, who you don't want to trade, that's up to you. However, right now, the only goal should be boost the asset value, retain the asset, wait for an opening, strike. And if it means that you're trading 2 of these players for one that really works on the timeline, I'm for it. I am not, however, to respond to this report by ESPN's Zach KD, I am not open to trading RJ plus IQ plus multiple firsts for De'Aaron Fox. De'Aaron Fox is not the level of player that I would move all those assets for, because once you do, you're locked into a core of De'Aaron Fox, Scottie Barnes, Grady Dick. That's a very mid team. That's barely better than the Atlanta Hawks. I don't do it for that. Jaden saying, who do you think is the best two-way player in this upcoming draft outside of Flag? Two-way. Good question. I don't think Ace is a great defender. Dylan's all right. I think beyond that, you're wishing on offensive or defensive upside. So with Kaman Maluach, you're hoping that the shot really comes around, and with Nolan Traore, same thing. You're really hoping that the defense holds up at the NBA level. When he gets up to that level, he gets stronger, and the shot isn't as variable and as swingy as it is overseas right now. With a guy like VJ Edgecombe, you really hope that he turns more into the Victor Oladipo, Dwayne Wade comp, as opposed to a defense-only offense, right? Yegor, no. VJ probably. I think it is VJ. I think it is VJ. But Harper is fine defensively. I don't think he's good, but I think he's fine. I think he'll struggle at the NBA level to be like a great defender. When we're talking two-way, we're talking Franz Wagner, right? There's no player other than Cooper Flag who projects to be as good two-way as Franz Wagner right now. Tariq saying, yo, Rob, do you think a prime Marc Gasol in his current team right now can take this team above 500? So, yeah, of course, 100%. Prime Marc Gasol would take this team to above 550, maybe 600. I actually don't think this team is that far away from 500. 1 second. Okay. So, yeah. What I'm saying is, quite frankly, I don't think this core works long term. I think the second you add a top 5 pick, the timeline will be reset. And if you've noticed, the Toronto Raptors do seem to have a bit of a vested interest in playing high lottery picks right away. Okay. Clearly, they played Grady a ton. They're starting Grady right now, even though he's not necessarily ready to defend at the NBA level. They started Scottie Barnes on day one. Yeah. Tumani Kamara is a great example of a player who can hang as your fifth starter, right? What I'm trying to say is this. In the conversation between a 75th percentile offensive player, 75th percentile defensive player, that player archetype of very above average on both sides, there's a type of team that prefers that player, and then there's a type of team that prefers Trae Young, 97th percentile offense, 5th percentile defense. There's a type of team that prefers an Anthony Simons, where it's like 97% offense, 2% defense. The Raptors are not one of those teams. So when you see one of those players on the Raptors, like a Bones Highland, a Lou Williams, they moved off of Lou Williams, didn't they? They moved off of DeMar DeRozan, didn't they? Anytime they've had a one-dimensional type of scorer, they've always tried to move off of that player. So they didn't just magically forget what brought them to the championship. What brought them to Rand saying is ESPN is IKD, dude, legit. Well, the entire NBA world is talking about De'Aaron Fox wanting out. And I'm going to assume, and ESPN is IKD, by the way, is a community member here. So I'm happy to DM him and ask him if it's legit, but I've talked to the guy multiple times. I don't think that he would just say this and not have any reason to say it. Now, it maps out with my internal belief that the Raptors are open to moving RJ Barrett. The branding has, when the Toronto Raptors signed up Immanual Quickley and Scottie Barnes, they were the graphic. They were on the posters. It was the future starts now. And there was a glaring omission, right? Now, I'm not saying that they're not open to keeping RJ and they're not open to keeping Immanuel Quickley long term. Clearly, they could hold on to both these guys. They can try to, get to the playoffs next year. Maybe the lottery pick that they pick up is a center, so he slots in and doesn't, convolute anything. And maybe they move him then. But whether you're talking about Terrence Ross being, or Jonas Valanciunas being moved eventually or moved right away. Oh my God. Raptor eyes. Sorry to burst the bubble here, but RJ ain't going nowhere. Frame this comment. Think about it when he does get moved. Yeah. I fundamentally do not agree with this notion that RJ is untouchable because he's averaging 23, 6 and 6. Because again, he's not one of the 10, 15 best players at his position in the league. He's one of the worst defenders at his position in the league. This sum total puts together a recipe for empty calorie scoring. Yeah. 12K before New Year's. That would be fantastic. We are not that far away. Videos like this probably aren't going to help our subscriber count at all. If nothing else, they're probably going to lead to a whole bunch of unsubscribes, but that's perfectly cool. Now, I'm not, please understand, I'm not saying, trade RJ at all costs, whatever. I'm saying if your goal is long-term IQ, RJ, Grady, get comfortable with losing in the first round, get comfortable not making the playoffs, get comfortable with a lot of real big disappointments, because fundamentally, none of those players can play anywhere but the perimeter, and those three together cannot guard the perimeter. You will be so bad. I'll guarantee it right now. It does not work under no circumstances. No amount of growth from RJ and Grady is going to fill the gap that these two have. When you have teams like the Orlando Magic, who are god amazing defensively, and they're going out and they're signing KCP to bolster their defense. When you have Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, Josh Hart over in New York, look at the teams around and find one player on a contender who is starting, taking heavy level rotation minutes, heavy level usage, 30% usage. That's not, you know what I mean? Like RJ, again, I feel like I'm going in circles here. RJ Barrett is not the worst player who takes high usage in the league. There are worse players. Jordan Poole is a worse player. Kyle Kuzma is a worse player. Those two are definitely worse. Brandon Miller, right now, I think Brandon Miller is a worse player. Who else do I think is a worse player? Cameron Thomas. I think Cam Thomas is a worse player. Jalen Green is a worse player. These players that I just mentioned, this is the RJ Barrett archetype. He is better than those players, but he is significantly worse than like everybody else on that list. If we factor for top 40 usage, actually, I want to show you. This is my last thing. I keep saying this, my last thing. Let me show you the top 40 usage guys in the NBA when we get out of here. Give me one sec here. Are you guys experiencing any lag at all during this stream? No? Yes? No? Okay. Okay. No lag. Thank God. That's good. That's great. Okay. So let me show you the usage leaders. So here's the usage leaders in the league. Okay. Let me highlight RJ Barrett because I'm going to highlight him and then I'm going to show you where he ranks in everything else. Where's RJ? Okay. RJ is 16th. He is 16th in usage. Here are the players above RJ Barrett in usage. De'Aaron Fox, Tyrese Maxey, Anthony Edwards, James Harden, Cam Thomas, Anthony Davis, Cade Cunningham, Franz Wagner, Nikola Jokic, Jason Tatum, Victor Wembanyama, Luka Doncic, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and LaMelo Ball, who is absurdly almost 40% usage. Now, here's the thing. When you have a high usage player who's not very good, it actually amplifies the effect of usage. It makes your team worse. It's like when you're good at usage versus when you're bad at usage. Now, RJ Barrett may be the third or fourth best player on the Toronto Raptors right now. So there's no complaints that he has high usage. He's played a ton of minutes without Scottie Barnes in the lineup. But even when Scottie's in the lineup, he is the highest usage player on the Raptors, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. However, some people want to say that that's warranted. So RJ Barrett is 16th in usage. Usage is a responsibility. Usage, to those of you who don't understand how it's calculated, is basically shot attempts, turnovers, assists. It's really just a calculation of how much you are impacting your team's usage. So with that usage should come value, shouldn't it? So the theory would be that if RJ Barrett is 16th in usage, then he should be at least top 50 in value of a replacement, right? Except he's 67th. And value replacement is a cumulative stat, which factors in for the fact that he plays a lot of minutes. But what about boxes minus? Where's he in terms of that? 79th. So the 16th usage player is 79th in terms of, okay, what about offensive boxes minus? We understand the defense is not great. 58th. Jared McCain's a rookie. He's ahead of him. Malik Monk, Zach LaVine, Trae Young, De'Aaron Fox, Cam Thomas, Pascal Siakam, Jaren Jackson Jr., Tyus Jones, Jared Allen, Obi Toppin, Santi Aldama. Yo, these are not the numbers you want to be associated with. What about win shares per 48? You would expect the guy is 16th, and some people want to build a franchise around him. You'd expect him to be somewhere high in the win shares per 48, right? Except he's 156th. Right ahead of Grady Dick. Right below Ben Mathurin, Kevin Huerter, the aforementioned Trey Murphy, Keegan Murray, Brandon Podziemski, Russell Westbrook. These are the names. And if you want to deny the numbers, Nikola Jokic, like who are the top guys? These are all, apart from Daniel Gafford, who just always scores really well on win shares. These are all like really impactful players. So again, I'm not saying nothing. What I'm not saying is that he's the worst player, right? There's clearly improvements across the years with RJ Barrett, and I can show you those improvements right here. Look at how much his assist rate and assist, even just per game, forget that, but like look at the per 100 possessions. Look at the assists. Like that's amazing. He's nearly doubled it from his time in New York, 4.1 to 8.6. This is great. The rebounding, it's up. The scoring is up. 33.1 points per 100 possessions is great. But you have to attempt 26.7 shots to get that. That's not great. That's not great. Shooting 45%. 2-point percentage is 50%. That's 10% lower than it was last year. Please stop telling me he's having a career year. He's having career usage. Okay? He's having career usage. People want to put LaMelo Ball in conversations with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and I'm trying to tell y'all, he's not in conversations. But LaMelo Ball is closer to Shai than RJ Barrett is to LaMelo Ball. Y'all understand what I'm saying? There's gaps. There's levels. Superstar, A1, B-tier superstar, as I mentioned. RJ Barrett is not a superstar. RJ Barrett is not a B-tier superstar. RJ Barrett is not an all-star. RJ Barrett is right now not a sub-all-star. What RJ Barrett is mildly better than a league average replacement player right now. Now, again, Trey Murphy versus RJ Barrett. Who do you want? That's the gap. Okay. Faux Time and Fam Jam saying that's great that RJ is improving, but we can see he's inconsistent. We should train him while he's high. Trade him. I think you mean trade him. Gotcha. Master saying also RJ is pretty much playing with the bench lineup most of the time. Doesn't it also kind of depend on the lineup you're playing with? I agree. Hell yeah. I agree. Not so much. No. A little bit, but not too much. RJ's free throws kill his efficiency. Yes, they do. Well, at least we got the draft to look forward to. Trey Murphy any day. I like two-way guys. And that's it, right? Trey Murphy's not a max player. Some of y'all think RJ's a max player, right? Light speed. Do you watch other teams play basketball? Does he go top 5 still? I don't know. Why don't you tell me if he goes top 5? Dumbest shit I've ever heard. All right. No, man. Look, I have okay, so I actually think the Raptors are going to get healthy pretty soon. I'm thinking I know that RJ is coming back tomorrow. Let's see if Emmanuel Quickley can come back maybe against New York, maybe one more game. And then you have like this 6-7 game sample where you'll try to get everybody healthy and just test this out. I have no doubt that RJ Barrett looks better with Emmanuel Quickley than he does with Davion Mitchell. Everybody looks better with Emmanuel Quickley, right? You just have to scroll back, dude. So again, I don't think RJ is this bad defensively, but I don't think he's good. And to reiterate my final point again and again and again, IQ plus Grady plus RJ does not work. Does not work. Compare it to Trey Murphy. Yeah, it's a gap. It's a big gap. And again, it's about portability. It's about asset. Why does the whole league want Cameron Johnson right now? Why do you think that the Nets are probably going to get 2 first-round picks for him? Because he's portable, man. He fits in everywhere. He can fit next to a star. It's like at this point, you're developing RJ, almost like a pseudo star or a second star. But if nobody else in the league sees him as that, you're not really doing yourself a great service. What you're doing, however, is you're doing the fans a service because they have a go-to scorer they can root for every night. You're doing his numbers a service. I don't know if you're necessarily doing him a service, right? But stars, like real stars, take mid-range shots, and the Raptors have pretty much instructed RJ not to do that. They're making him very one-dimensional. And is Davion better than prime Corey Joseph? No, Corey's better. James Welsh saying the Raptors crew of bad broadcasters tell casuals RJ is an all-star, so they believe it. It's their job, man. It's their job. It's their job to, promote players. It was their job to tell you that Chris Bosh was an MVP. It was their job to tell you that DeMar DeRozan was one of the 3 best shooting guards in the league. It's their job to tell you Vince Carter is the next Michael Jordan. But what they say doesn't make it true. What I say doesn't make it true. I can say RJ Barrett is not a top 50, top 60, top 70 player in the league. But he is top 16 in usage, right? I think the gap comes down to portability and how useful you are when I take the ball out of your hands. Because I think if you can agree with me that no championship offense will ever or has ever been, orchestrated by a player as limited as RJ Barrett, well, then you have to ask yourself, what role does an RJ Barrett play on a 96 Chicago Bulls or a 2017 Warriors? What role does he play? Because I don't have any questions about what role Andre Iguodala plays. I have no questions about what role Danny Green plays. I have no, that's where we say, is Danny Green a more effective championship player than DeMar DeRozan? Probably, yeah. Yeah, he is. He's not a better player than DeMar DeRozan. Don't get me wrong. Is OG Anunoby a more effective championship player than an RJ Barrett? Hell yeah. He's not more talented, though. He can't do more stuff. Did DeRozan ruin the chemistry in Sacramento? I would never accuse DeMar DeRozan of ruining chemistry with anybody, but he is a defensive pylon, and they do have Domantas Sabonis on that team as well. If you ever want to see the gap between, I think DeMar. Actually, I'm so glad you brought that up. I'm so glad you brought that up, Ocean God. I'm really glad you brought this up. Because what didn't the Kings do to get DeMar DeRozan? They gave up multiple seconds. They salary dumped Davion Mitchell for a player who's worse than Davion Mitchell, unbelievably, in Jalen McDaniels, so they could free up the cap space so they can get DeMar DeRozan, right? I think they gave up even more than that. What did they give up to the Bulls to get him? I don't remember the exact details of the trade, but they gave up a lot to get DeMar. They wanted to make a big splash. I'll never forget, Vivek Ranadive has had so many embarrassing moments, Stauskas, whatever. But, comparing Buddy Hield to Steph Curry, the greatest hits of Vivek Ranadive is crazy. But I told Leo when DeMar got signed, when they signed DeMar, y'all are going to have some real trouble closing games with him defensively. And what's happening? It's not a secret. Is DeMar DeRozan a more talented player than Trey Murphy and Herb Jones? Hell yes. But Herb Jones is better in Sacramento. Trey Murphy is better in Sacramento. Fine line between constructive criticism and hating. Okay, cool. Let's start with constructive criticism. In order for RJ Barrett to have a future in Toronto, what would he need to do? And what's good and what's bad? Okay, so what's good is he makes really quick decisions and he's making quicker decisions. That's good. What's also good is he's 24 years old. This is vastly better than if he was 29, 30, 31, or whatever. I like that. He's a team first guy. He seems to really care about winning, and he is not selfish at all. Seems to really vibe off the court with the Raptors other court players. Cool. This is good. These are all good things. What does he need to do to be a perma part of the core going forward? Sorry if I'm a little bit blurry here. One sec. What does he need to do to become a perma part of the core? Number one, he needs to become a dead-eye, catch-and-shoot three-point shooter. Number two, he needs to become at least a 35th percentile defender, which means effort is non-negotiable. You are not talented enough, big enough, strong enough, quick enough defensively to just mail it in. You must prioritize defense at all costs. I'm sure RJ wants to be here forever. And if he gets traded, it will be a very bittersweet moment for me because, generally speaking, I'm rooting for the guy. I want him to be successful here, but not if it means that the Toronto Raptors cannot be successful with him. And that's a tough pill to swallow. It's a really tough pill to swallow when you tell that person, you know what? I love you, but we're not a good fit. I love you, but XYZ complication is going to make it hard for us to coexist in the same home, right? You love RJ Barrett for all the good things that I mentioned. The fact that he's developing as a playmaker, it makes it much easier. He's not a ball stopper necessarily. He's a great transition player. You know what slows down in the playoffs? Pace, transition, right? So the things that he is excelling at are going to get exposed in the playoffs. All the tight gaps that you have to navigate, the tight decisions. Did you all watch the Milwaukee versus OKC game? Did you see how tight those passing angles are and those passing windows are? How good you have to be to thread that. This is why I want the Raptors core to be healthy against a healthy Magic team or a healthy Cleveland team, just so y'all can see for yourselves how big the gap is, right? So in order for RJ to participate, that needs to happen. Unfortunately, RJ is not in control of his own destiny because in order for him to exist in Toronto, another thing must happen, which is Grady must become a league average defender. I think Grady's upside defensively is a little bit higher than RJ's, although neither of them project to be great. I think if Grady becomes significantly better defensively next year, it will make it easier. The third thing that must happen for RJ to be here long term is the Raptors must draft a generational defensive prospect to be their fifth starter in place of Jakob Poeltl. Now I can see it working because Immanuel Quickley plus Grady Dick creates enough spacing for RJ and Scottie to attack, and that fifth defender being a Giannis Antetokounmpo level, floor raising defender can elevate you into top 10 defense in conjunction with RJ becoming a 30th percentile defender and Grady becoming like a 45th, 50th percentile defender. So defense harder to teach than offense or natural defender? I'm not sure I understand the question. I don't think players get significantly better on either end, to be completely frank with you. I've watched players regress for a little bit in the wrong scheme. Like Donovan Mitchell is a great example of a player that just for a few years was just so terrible defensively. We were all wondering collectively what's going on. And then he's just become really good the last 2 years. I think there are players that always, there's a little bit more room in a different scheme. Maybe they could be better hidden, right? But one thing I don't doubt is that Shamshi, Mobo, Battle, Jacoby, Grady are part of the future with Scottie. So you have some pieces that you can build some continuity with. Keep your assets open. Keep your eyes open for deals. No, I wouldn't trade the farm for De'Aaron Fox, but would I trade the farm for something better than De'Aaron Fox? Would I trade the farm for a Donovan Mitchell? Not that he's available, but if he were available, yeah, I would. So that's the type of player. That's the type of player I would be looking for if I'm talking about moving off of 3 picks or something of that sort. I'm not the worst type of deals. If you're looking around the NBA, the worst types of deals are what? The Mikal Bridges for 5 first-round picks. You don't Jakob Poeltl for 3 picks. Don't trade multiple picks for these types of players. Just it's not worth it. If someone trades 2 firsts for Nikola Vucevic right now because they're desperate, they're stupid. Don't do it. Okay? These players barely move the needle. They look like they're moving the needle. But the real star impact, because again, when it comes down to basketball, there's only 5 players on the court. The individual impact of any one player on a basketball game is greater than the individual impact of any one player on any game, period. There's no team sport that I can think of, maybe y'all can, where one player being so good creates more of an advantage. Not in soccer. No Pele, no, Maradona, no, none of these guys can create the impact on a soccer pitch that Michael Jordan can create on the basketball court. So that one player positive impact also works the other way defensively. When I try to think about Game 7, Orlando, Toronto, RJ on the court, Grady on the court, IQ on the court, Raptors on defense, tie game, 17 seconds, I would bet money that the Orlando Magic will score that possession. I don't know enough about soccer, so maybe you're right. Maybe you're right. But in theory, there's 11 players on a soccer pitch, right? There's like 7 players in hockey. So doesn't one player being better? Like I'm not specifically trying to compare Michael Jordan to Messi or Michael Jordan to Tom Brady, but I'm just saying, like, in theory, if one player is one of 10 players on the court versus 20 players on the court, like if we made basketball 7-on-7, wouldn't that diminish the value of any one player? If we just expanded the court and made the court, 15 feet wider and added 2 more players, wouldn't that diminish the value of any one player? Five on the ice, 1 in net in hockey, but I'd still say basketball still. Wow, am I so stupid? I didn't know. I thought hockey was 6. Right, it's 5. Same, yes. It's still 11 players. Yo, RJ was pretty good for Team Canada. He was better than Jamal Murray, I'll tell you that much. All right, guys. There's a really, really cool game happening right now. I would suggest any of y'all watch it. You might be watching the future face of basketball in Toronto, especially on the women's side, Juju Watkins. Juju Watkins versus Paige Beckers is happening right now. If you have cable, just search for it, USC UConn. I'm pretty sure it's on right now. So I'm going to go check that game out. I can't wait. Paige is my favorite player in college basketball right now, men or women's. I don't care. I love Paige Beckers. And then on top of that, we got Juju Watkins on the other side, who's my second favorite player. So I got to watch my favorite player versus my second favorite player in college basketball. That's super cool. So I'm definitely going to check that out. I have confirmed it is on cable right now. So it's UConn versus USC, women's, 8 o'clock. So we're already 20 minutes into that game. I'm going to go check it out. Thank y'all for tuning in. This was a little bit of a rambly, incoherent, repetitive, probably rant. Hopefully it was of some value. Hopefully the bulk of the value came from conversing in the chat as well. But yeah, wish they did playback for that game. Yeah, me too. All right, peace, guys. Take care. And yeah, please subscribe. And also, this episode of Pensar Basketball was brought to you by the Penn Dance Film Festival. Tickets and passes go on sale tonight for the Penn Dance Film Festival. And it's a really good festival, and I think y'all should check it out. Peace.